to Faith on Film, a program designed to keep you aware and informed on everything that's happening in the world of faith and family television. I have a great guest for you today. David Matthew Weese is a writer and director known for Out of Time, Clerical Errors, and Healed by Grace. That's it? Wait a minute. Did we run out of paper or something? I don't see much else here.
Were you looking
David,
for film title?
Welcome to Faith on Film. So
I have no credit.
I was going to say, this has got to be the shortest one I've had ever. So either this is going to be a very short show, or you've got a lot of stuff that you haven't put on there. Hey, welcome to Faith on Film, man.
Thank you, sir. How are you?
I'm doing terrific. So listen, since there wasn't much that I could tell everybody, I'm expecting for you to just tell us all about your journey of how you even got into filmmaking. Was this something that you always desired to do, or what?
No, what happened was I was doing, we were doing like corporate video, training videos, things like that back in 2008. And what a lot of people don't realize probably is that you were instrumental in my the opportunity that I got to even really make films was largely because of you. What happened was we made a film just because we thought we could. Let's give it a try, kind of thing. It seemed like a fun thing to do, and that film was the 18-month window. And
that's right.
So back, in the day, you acquired that picture, and then you and I basically became friends. And over the course of 2 years, when the organization you were with at that time was ready to acquire original content, as I recall, you guys contracted with two different guys, and the other guy didn't last very long or something. But so then I wound up making, I believe, 4 pictures with you guys. So
and
that was,
I think one of them was, as far as I could tell, a great success. It wasn't a big budget film. We weren't doing big budget films or anything, but yet that movie actually did real well, and it's gone all over the world, hasn't it?
Right. I don't know. Is your audience for this show, are they filmmakers, or are they just people who like Christian?
No, you know what? I'm going to say a lot of them are filmmakers, yes, but also just technically people that love, faith and family films.
Okay.
Because the program is not just like on YouTube, where it's probably mostly filmmakers, but because it is on many actual television networks, there's just a lot of people that are able to see the show.
Okay. So basically what happened was we had a situation where we were making what amounted to made-for-TV movies, right?
Right.
Okay, so we made The Studio, we made Out of Time, which was kind of a thriller, and then what happened was I was kind of worried that the network would cancel our deal if I didn't figure out a way to allow the network to start making some money from these movies. And that was what led me to meet with a distributor and basically just pick their brain and say, look, what's selling, what's successful? And that resulted in a tick list of about 6 characteristics, like tragedy, the horses thing. And I took that list and wrote a script based on that list, and then somewhat predictably, that was Healed by Grace, and that was pretty successful. Now, so every picture that I made for this will be of interest to the filmmakers out there, I suppose, is that every single film I made with you guys, in fact, every film I've ever made. So that would be Healed by Grace. That would include Clerical Errors, which you mentioned, which is going to be distributed soon globally. And then Healed by Grace 2, which is already out everywhere. So there's a sequel. Every single one of those movies was made for a total out-of-pocket cost of $8,000. And on the last movie, that included paying to have Sean Young come in for a day and do 4 scenes. So literally $8,000 was the budget, and it all went to the actors. Like 100% of that money went to the actors. And, people look at Healed by Grace 2, and people in the distribution world have looked at it and said, I say, what do you think the movie cost to make? And typically they'll say, probably about 150, maybe 200,000. That's been totally normal. So it just goes to show that if you don't throw money at the problem and use creativity instead, you can get really good results. Just kind of using your noggin and your creativity instead. So
I visit a lot of film festivals and conferences and things, and I always talk about you and the film by Grace, because I say, you know what, David did something actually very smart, and that is he went to the distributor, the one that actually sells the films, and said, like you just mentioned, what can I do to make the film sellable by you? And the things that I talk about, of course, he said, well, you use a teenager, you use a kid, you use a dog, you use a horse. I said, and he does a movie that has all of those elements in it, and boom, that's what created the success of this particular film. And so, that doesn't mean that we should always do what I call now dog and pony films, but it certainly made it easy for that to bring in a return.
Well, and it's not really just gratuitous either, because you have to bring some craft to the writing of the script. You got to bring some craft to the cinematography. Certainly, in my case, I also have written the musical scores to all my films. So you got to, at every stage, there's a dozen things throughout the course of making a film where it can go sideways. And I'll be honest with you, Isaac, I don't look at Healed by Grace as a great movie. Okay, it was very successful. I mean, at retail, it probably made $1 million, but you got to realize too that was a movie that was right for its time and for its market. Because as you recall, we had the retail sector back then, and DVDs were still a thing. Yeah. And that literally disappeared just a short time later. The bottom dropped out, really, of the industry about 5-6 years ago, right?
Yeah, that's
when
right.
Family Christian stores went out of business.
Yeah. Of course, that was a big help in lowering that budget, was the fact that you wrote it, directed it, produced it. I believe you probably also DP'd it. You did the sound scoring, or the music scoring, like you said, and did all the ADR work, or the redubbing of the sound. So that sure saved you a lot of money, didn't it?
Well, I'll give you an example of the kind of thing I've learned along the way that a lot of filmmakers don't consider. Is whenever we would shoot a scene, what we would do is we would get the coverage with the wide shot, which is, typically you want to do that anyway, so you got something to edit with. And then what you do is you don't do a bunch of takes, okay? You get a bunch of angles, so you've got the raw material to tell your story at the editing stage. But then here's the key. When you finished shooting a scene a half a dozen times, what you find is by then the actors are all saying their lines pretty much the same way every time. So then what you do is you gather the cast around the camera and run it as a radio play. And now you've got a take that's got super clean audio that can be cut in. And frankly, on Healed by Grace 2, probably more than half of the lines in that movie actually came from the quote-unquote radio play, and we never had to do ADR.
Interesting. Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to take a break right now, and when we come back, let's talk about a new project that you're working on now, which I think, if I heard you correctly at one point when we talked, you said you're not sure you're going to continue making movies, but you're working on something different now, aren't you?
We'll see. We'll see when we come back.
Sounds good. Folks, don't go away. We're going to be back with David Weese. Welcome back to Faith on Film. We are here with David Matthew Weese, who is a producer, director, writer, DP, musician. He's all sorts of things, but more than that, he's my friend.
I am your friend.
So David, am I correct? Did you decide that maybe you're not going to necessarily produce movies anymore?
Well, here's what happened. I released the sequel to Healed by Grace 2, and that was about 3 years ago, and that film's doing fine. And one of the things that I had always done, in addition to being a musician and a writer and all the rest, Mr. Artsy Fartsy creative guy, was I was always kind of like the best artist in school. I was always a cartoonist. And one of the things that I put on hold for about 30 years of my life was cartooning and animation.
Okay.
And especially when COVID hit, I thought, if I can do all these things that are, that comprise making a film, why don't I do this one thing that I've sort of been putting off my whole life, which was animation? And once again, I had a discussion with a distributor about that and kind of ran the idea by him. And it seems like with the proliferation of these new platforms like Tubi and Pluto.tv and all this sort of thing, that maybe the timing was right to pursue a project like this. So I can kind of show you. Can I turn my phone and kind of show you what I'm talking about?
Sure. Why
Okay,
not?
so if we can you see that screen right there?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to turn the I'm trying to turn the phone at the right angle there. There we go. So this is probably hard to see, but if you scan through it, you can kind of see that
Huh.
there's a lot of stuff here. What we actually have is we have at this point 2 episodes of a 24-minute cartoon that are almost fully animated. So we've got 2 episodes that are close to done. There's about 3 more minutes of animation to go. And those 2 episodes comprise like a 2-part pilot for what would be planned as a 12-episode series.
I see. And of course, this is not going to be as costly as typical animation because you're doing it all, correct?
Well, yeah, it's true that the out-of-pocket cost is pretty nominal. The time demands are kind of a lot higher than with a movie. The animation process is pretty time-consuming. But what I found, though, at the same time, is it's the same thing I found with like that trick I told you about getting good audio for a movie. What you find is if you really deconstruct the process, you often find that the conventional Hollywood wisdom about how things need to be done or what the right way to do things is often wrong, and it's often conventional wisdom that doesn't necessarily think creatively about ways around some of the problems. So there are some, for example, the animation is typically done at 8 frames per second, right? Okay. So if you think about Disney, classic 2D animated Disney, you're talking about typically 24 frames per second. The old Warner Brother cartoons were like 12 frames per second typically. So it's more like Japanese anime, where when you kind of reduce the workload in certain ways. In fact, if you think about anime, are you familiar with anime?
Yep.
Okay, so one of the things they typically do in anime is they really invest effort into backgrounds, and then the storytelling really focuses on the poses, where you get if you could pick a shot and say what's the one pose that best captures what that shot is supposed to capture, and then you actually have one shot that's you just animated the lip sync or some eye blinks, and then they'll move the camera. They'll basically do the stuff that's cheap to do. And the economics of anime production has actually resulted in an aesthetic. It's become a look that people actually enjoy, even though it's in some ways quite economical, right? So just applying some of those lessons and a few other things I picked up along the way, I think will help to. I at this point think I could by myself generate an episode in about 4 months, which is still pretty fast. Okay. But what I expect is probably we'll get the first episode on the street and then probably look at doing a crowdfund thing, kind of like The Chosen. Everybody talks about The Chosen. That's a great example of a show where I don't know much about the creator, but I think essentially his career wasn't quite going where he wanted it to go. And once he got The Chosen out on the street and just gave it for free, and people realized, hey, this is kind of a cool thing, that kind of opened up the opportunity and people began to support it. Correct. Right?
No, absolutely. Now, this is not necessarily a Christian or faith-based project, is it?
No, and in fact, I mean, that when you talk about my career going forward, I definitely want to get away from Christianese language. I mean, we could talk a long time, you and I, about this kind of stuff, but basically, I think that the ethics that we all share, no matter what our belief systems, for me are more important at this point. And when I originally envisioned this show, it's called Salt and Light, which does probably suggest to some people, salt of the, salt of the earth, light of the world kind of idea. But basically, it's based in a time shortly after the flood, before there was religion, before there was a Bible. All you had was ethics, really. and just the choices that people make. And so it's really just an adventure series about three young people and a monkey who get thrown together against their will into a situation much bigger than themselves.
Wow.
And they don't like each other at first. So you got a lot of conflict. That's a lot of fun. But it's really about the ethics of problem solving and people having to look inward and make hard decisions about what they stand for, that type of thing. So as a cartoon, it's probably got more in common with something like Avatar: The Last Airbender without the magic, pretty much,
right?
If that makes sense.
Well, if people want to just kind of follow you and keep, just stay aware of where you are in the process, what you're doing, how would they do that?
Either on Facebook, you can follow Blended Planet on Facebook, Blended Planet Pictures, which is my company, or you can go to blendedplanet.com, which right now the homepage for blendedplanet.com is really all about Salt and Light. So you can watch like the intro to the show and see it's like a trailer, and get a sense of what it's about.
Excellent. Well, David, thank you for taking the time to be with us today and share a little bit about what you're doing. I know we had a lot of technical problems in the beginning, but we pressed on and we made it through. All right.
We did. Well, thank you, my friend. I appreciate it.
You bet. Folks, don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Faith on Film for our special Holly on Hollywood segment. Holly, how are you today?
Doing great, Isaac. Glad to be with you.
What insights do you have for us today?
Okay, I have kind of a different thing to talk about. Very different with your audience, and I hope that they have the patience and understanding to see why I'm doing it. Oh. Not to get you in trouble, but
you're making me nervous.
They just had the Emmys on, okay, for those of you who watched it last month. The Emmys were on in several shows. I didn't really watch it, I got to admit, because it's not my thing to watch that anymore, really much of it. But there's a show that interested me that I did pay attention to. It's a new show on Apple, which mostly I don't like the things on Apple TV. I got to admit, it's depressing and most of them are dark. But there's a new show called Ted Lasso. Now, I don't know if you've heard of it or not, but you're probably going to. It is like wildfire spreading, and it is on Apple TV. So if you don't have Apple, then you may not be able to see it. It's an adult comedy. So right off the bat, I'm telling you, it's an adult comedy. It's got some language in it. So for people that are offended by language, I'm saying do not watch this. So I'm telling you right now, if you're offended by that, then don't tune in, because it does have language. It's about a British soccer team. The owner, she goes through divorce. She's upset with her husband because they both own the team and he gave it to her because it's a losing team. So to get back at him, she's going to hire an American football coach to basically run the team into the ground and get back at her husband. So she hires Jason Sudeikis, who plays the character Ted Lasso. He's a football coach in America, not even a big one, of a smaller team. He comes over to England and he brings his, assistant coach with him, Beard, the character's called. And Ted and Beard take over this team, this British soccer team. So the humor is he knows nothing about soccer. He only knows American football. And he tries to use all these American football plays and stuff with soccer teams. The British team thinks he's just a joke and they're upset with him and all the little locals of the town. So you get to know the characters, you get to know. And at first I thought, okay, I was watching a couple of them and I'm like, the 4-letter words and but it's the British team and there's some of them. And then British terms, I won't be saying them on here, but there's, British terms for crudities as well. So first I thought, oh man, this isn't going to go over with a lot of audiences, but I'll tell you what it's done. It's brought back for people that would never go to church, never watch Christian television, but they're into secular TV. This show is starting to change lives. They've had people write in and literally say, it saved us during COVID. And I've forgiven my father because I watched this show. And it's teaching kindness to people again. It's a show about kindness and bringing back kindness. It's teaching people how to forgive, how to love one another, how to love families. It's restoring father-son relationships. And even through divorce, because a couple of characters go through divorce, and it's how it affects their life and how they have to try to still for the children, have a good relationship and keep it positive. And I'm telling you, a show that will do that. That's why I'm talking about it with you and bringing it up. Is it's encouraging that on secular television there are still a few things, even though it may have crude language, even though it may not be what Christians prefer to watch or focus on, but for people, like I said, who will never go to church, who won't watch Christian television, who won't pay attention to that, here's a show that's touching them. And I will say one comment to this. When I was doing Christian radio on KKLA radio years ago, I had a show called Holly on Hollywood on Saturday nights. And I did movie reviews and a guest, and we talked about different things. And I asked one night, I asked a question. I said, how many of you have seen a secular movie or a movie that brought you to Christ, that brought you to be a Christian? And a guy called in and he said, yeah, he goes, I was agnostic. He goes, I kind of believed in God, but I kind of didn't. He goes, I wasn't exactly an atheist, but I never was taught religion, never had been trained. He goes, I went and saw The Matrix. And when I saw The Matrix and they had the Zion in The Matrix, and he said, I kept asking him, what's Zion? And someone said, oh, it's in the Bible. He said, so I went to the Bible to look up Zion. And when I found out what that was, it started getting me interested in other things in the Bible. And he goes, I became a Christian because of The Matrix. Yep. And I went, wow, that was so eye-opening for me to go, see, God can use anything to bring people to Christ.
Well, thank you for being with us and bringing us a little more insight on what's happening in Hollywood. Right, Holly?
Yes, I do. Thanks so much, Isaac. Good to be with you.
Folks, don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I want to throw you a very special invitation to next week's episode. You see, next week is my 100th episode of Faith on Film. I'm so grateful to God that He's allowed me to reach that milestone of 100 episodes. And I have a very special guest for you. Nancy Stafford, who was my guest on show number 1, is going to be my guest on show number 100. You don't want to miss this episode. And if you want to catch that show, episode number 1 with Nancy Stafford that I did over 2 years ago, just go to my YouTube channel, Faith on Film TV. There you will be able to find that episode and watch it, and then you can let me know whether I got any better from that one to this one. So just go over to YouTube and check it out. Well, I've pretty much run out of time, so I look forward to seeing you next week.